You had so many experiences that other people can only faintly dream of what that would be like to be like carrying the hopes and dreams of like, oh, like, of like an entire people. Like
Obviously, it's nowhere near the scale of running for president, right? But for me, I think as I reflect on my journey, it has been a complete balancing act from beginning to end, which is how do I embrace my culture, but in a way, do I want to be defined by it? And that's the thing, you know what I mean? Like I'm never going to shy away from the fact that I'm Asian American, but at the same time, I also don't want to be just seen only as yo, he's an Asian rapper, and that's why we need to pay attention to him. It's a balancing act. So in terms of what's going on right now, I feel like there's a unity within the community that I've never
yeah.
seen, right? And as far as everybody galvanizing their energies collectively to tell our stories, to have a voice. So I'm excited in that, because I think I've always looked at my journey as my journey, right? Like, oh, this is my journey. I started rapping, blah, blah, blah. But unbeknownst to me, my journey has been a lot of people's journey. It's our collective journey.
Welcome back to Yang Speaks. It's your co-host, Zach Grauman. We're glad you guys are back. We've got the one and only MC Jin, the musician, the rapper. I'll never forget, MC Jin made a Yang Gang anthem when we were running for president. And I'm not gonna lie to you, we played it in the bus way more often than we should have. But they talk about his career, how he started on BET. He's an amazing guy. Please welcome MC Jin to Yang Speaks. All right, 2020 showed us a lot of things, but of anything, it showed us that we never know what life is going to throw at us. And if you use credit cards to pay for unexpected expenses, it can be overwhelming to manage that debt. So take control with Upstart so you can know exactly what to expect when you're paying off credit card debt. So Upstart is a fast and easy way to get a personal loan to pay off your debt all online. So whether that's paying off credit cards, highly consolidated, high interest debt, funding personal expenses, over 500,000 freaking people have used Upstart to get simple fixed monthly payments. They consolidate it all. They use lots of different inputs to evaluate a different type of credit score for you. They find smarter rates with trusted partners, and they assess more than just the credit score, which I love. Find out how Upstart can help lower your monthly payments today when you go to upstart.com/yang. That's upstart.com/yang. Don't forget to use our URL and let them know we sent you. The loan amounts will be determined based on your credit, income, and certain other information provided in your loan application. That's upstart.com/yang.
It is my pleasure to welcome to the podcast musician, artist, actor, trailblazer, pioneer, charter member of the Yang Gang, the man responsible for some of the coolest shit that come out of the presidential campaign, MC Jin. Jin, welcome.
What's up? Finally, I'm here chilling with Andrew. There's no limit to what we can do. We don't have no plans, true, but we will come through and make sure that this podcast is one of the best. Now, that's no disrespect to the rest, but I know that to be here speaking with you, I am truly blessed. Yes.
Oh my gosh. So that's how the man won 106th and Park over and over again and became this hip hop rising star legend, urban legend. Back in the day, I've been so looking forward to this, Jin, and I associate you with some of the best times on the presidential trail because anytime I saw you, it was at some rally in LA or in New York. There's like a crowd of like hundreds or thousands, and you would go and rock it.
Yeah, great memories. If nothing else for me, just that's a great way to kind of segue into, man, how I discovered you and just the organic fashion of how I got to know you. and how we ultimately like formally crossed paths. I mean, everybody's Yang Gang story is different, right? But for mine, nobody was like, hey, this is the thing, you got to join it. Like it didn't, nobody had to hard sell it to me. I discovered it on my own. And I think a key part was the book, right? The War on Normal People. And I have this, kind of funny just thing that I like, an inside joke that's within inside myself, is that as I discovered more about you and I would cross paths with people in the Yang Gang, they would all say, yeah, I learned about him through the Joe Rogan podcast. Have you seen the Joe Rogan podcast? And I was like, no, I haven't seen it. And it became this ongoing thing that the more people said to me, have you seen it? I was like, no, and I'm not going to watch it.
You were like, I'm going to withhold. It's funny, Jid, because we had the reverse joke on the trail during that time where like everyone who was coming was like, hey, Joe Rogan podcast.
I kind of feel like I'm part of a special breed that, I hooked onto the Yang Gang without the Joe Rogan podcast, right? So shout out to everybody else that's in that same category. But nonetheless, I did hear that podcast was a great introduction to you, your vision, what you're trying to bring to the table, and kind of overall picture of who is this Andrew Yang guy, But in terms of actually meeting you, because it's one thing when I read the book, it's one thing when I'm watching you on the news clips and the interviews, but I think to be at a rally, to be able to introduce you on stage, to perform, Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up with, Drew Yang. And as soon as it clicked, I was like, yo, nobody's done this. Well, here I am, right? And that's when I found my purpose in life.
You kidding, man? I mean, you've had your purpose, and I really want to get into this because you are such a pioneer for so many people. And I'm just imagining being an Asian American kid growing up in the 80s and 90s. In your case, you were born in Florida, but then you all moved to New York and Queens when you were a teenager. Is that right?
Yeah, I moved to New York. It's about to be 20 years. No, this year is 20 years. I moved to New York when I was 19. And there's an interesting tie. It's kind of like what do you call it? Like a bittersweet reason, because it was directly after 9/11. So 9/11 happened, and that triggered a massive change globally, right? But as it pertains to my own household, we were living in Miami at the time. I was born and raised in Miami. Shout out to all the Miami Yang Gang out there, right? All the Florida Yang Gang. But at the time, I remember the discussion in our household was we wanted to be closer to my mama and yeah. So that's grandma and grandpa on the paternal side. So they came to America, they're of the 60s, 70s generation. So when they immigrated to America, it was straight to New York, straight to the heart of Chinatown, literally a hop, skip, and a jump away from the World Trade. So what happened was after 9/11, as my mom and dad were discussing how do we be closer to them, rather than uprooting them and bringing them to Miami, the discussion was we go up to New York. Now, at the time, I had graduated high school, so I was like 18, turning 19 roughly. And, they actually said to me, you don't have to come. You're old enough now that you can decide, do you want to stay down here or do you want to go? It was a no-brainer for me, though, because I've always been like a homebody. I'm very much attached to my family.
Sure,
yeah. And also, I knew that if I was going to make this rap dream come to life in any way, it would be at the Mecca. It would be in New York City, the birthplace of hip hop,
So you grow up in Miami. You clearly are super into hip hop from an early age.
Yes.
And then I'd imagine because your grandparents were in New York, you probably traveled to New York periodically and visited them. Is that right?
Often, every summer, from a young age, but most vividly in my mind, probably from 8 years old on to 13. So like those 5 years, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, every summer I'm in New York. I'm running around Chinatown, Columbus Park. I'm all over like East Broadway, a lot of trips back and forth down East Broadway, mainly because that was the route from the apartments that my grandparents lived in to the heart of Chinatown. So yeah, a lot of vivid, fond childhood memories, walking up and down Mott Street, Mulberry, like a lot of memories, really, really dope.
So you're into music. And it sounds like even as a teenager, you're like, yo, I think I want to do this like myself professionally. I have to imagine that your parents were not thrilled with this passion in their son because, you know, I know a little something about Asian parents.
All right. So on that side of things, yes, there were several, end of the world, Armageddon level type, just tensions within our household surrounding this particular passion of mine. I think at its peak was probably as I got older, because when I was like 12 or 13, it was very clear that I had an affinity for this. Because here are some like key points that I remember. I remember that when I was 12 or 13, one thing that was a crucial spark was we went to this carnival in Miami. And at the carnival, there was like a booth where you, like a mobile recording booth. And they still have these now, where you basically pay like $20 or whatever. They'll put you into the recording booth. They'll give you the lyrics to a particular song that you pick, and then you can record it. And, they'll give you a cassette recording of it. So I remember I did this, and it was an A side, B side. On the A side, I did LL Cool J. Mama said, knock you out. I'm going to knock you out. And then on the B side, I did Criss Cross. Jump, jump. The Mac Daddy make you jump, jump. Some of them try to rhyme, but they can't rhyme like me, right? So the point I'm trying to make is, as a 12, 13-year-old, I don't think I could have facilitated this myself. So to some degree, my mom or dad, they had to have paid the $20, agreed to this, and let me do it. So I did that. And I guess at that point, they didn't realize that this was the beginning of something that would alter the rest of the course of my life. So I think the real tension didn't kick in until I was maybe like 16, 17. Because at 16, 17, I was very vocal to them about the fact that this is my path, and number one, I think especially approaching senior year, I was very straightforward about, I don't intend on applying to any colleges. And honestly,
that's a tough nut to hear from that point of view.
For parents in general, but in this case, yes, I think telling your immigrant Asian parents that, I'm not even taking the SATs. Like if anyone even asked me, yeah, what was your SAT scores, Jin? Non-existent. I didn't take it.
I love the purity of this, Jin, because that this is like, hey, there is no other path. Like I'm not gonna like check it out and see what that other path would look like. It's like, this is what I'm doing.
There's a beauty to it, because as I got older, eventually, they came around. And I think it was, in terms of them coming around, it was a combination of just, at some point they had to realize that, well, it's not that we love our son any less, but it's just like, this is his calling. This is his passion, and even though initially they weren't 100% on board, they did arrive at a place where they accepted it. My mom came around really quick. My mom was like, okay, if this is something that he really wants to do, she was on board for it. My dad, though, his name is Joe. He definitely was like, I'm holding out as long as I can, right? And he was not for it. But the quote unquote happy ending is that as far as right now, oh my gosh, my dad is he's probably more hip hop. He's more of a hip hop head than I am, right? Like he's like, it's amazing. It's amazing.
This episode of Yang Speaks is brought to you once again by Outer Known. Guys, I love this company. So it's high quality clothes with a great fit. It's founded by pro surfer and 11-time world champion Kelly Slater. And they're high quality, they're sustainable, and they are comfy AF. Holy cow. It's like, I have a pair of jeans and I have this like long sleeve, like flannel situation, and it's so comfy. Yang does these all the time. He loves their flannels. They're just super comfy. They look good, they fit well, and you're doing right in the world. So here's the deal. Go to outerknown.com today and enter our code YANG at checkout, and you'll get 25% off your first full price order, which is awesome. So outerknown.com. That's outerknown.com. And remember to use our code YANG at checkout for 25% off. Check them out today, outerknown.com. And don't forget, promo code YANG, 25% off.
Did you perform to live audiences, for example, in like your high school talent show? Was there some evidence that you actually had these not just passions, but also like, frankly, ability?
Well, I'll tell you this. I'll be the first to tell you. Like 14-year-old Jin, it was one thing to mimic and emulate the rappers that I loved, right? In this case, whether it's LL Cool J, whether it's Chris Cross, whether it's whoever, right? But to actually, you're right. What does it mean in terms of my own craft? Like, are you writing your own raps, Jin? Are you performing at the talent show? Yes. So to answer your question, yes. So there were several talent show experiences. I definitely started working on my own compositions, and I will be the first to say they were garbage. They were hot trash. But everybody starts somewhere. And but I have fond memories of that too, of that process. Because aside from the parents, right? So you cover the Asian parent side. But another fascinating aspect to me is one reason why I loved hip hop so much, because there was a camaraderie to it. So my close circle of friends, right? Like let's say close 3-4 friends. That was like our clique. That was our little squad. We were all into the same things naturally. The NBA, we all love playing ball. And in this case, hip hop, right? Like we just loved hip hop. And the funny thing is, these are some of my best, like BFFs, so to speak, friends that I still keep in touch with to this day. And I'm grateful for that too. We're all about to be close to 40, right? But I remember vividly that even within this small circle of friends, these are my brothers, my comrades. They're like, yo, Jin, ain't nobody trying to hear you rap, yo. Nobody, nobody.
They were like, you can do it.
No. These were not those friends.
Really, the big question is like, how the heck does someone break into the music industry, as like a 19-year-old kid? Like you show up in Queens. Like, what the heck was that process like? Because for me, and I remember when you did start winning these rap battles on BET.
On 106 in Park, yeah.
Yeah, 106 in Park. I think that was probably a couple years after you arrived in New York. But that was when you started hitting the radar of popular culture and people like me.
I mean, I feel like all along I was looking for this big break. So in Miami, I was already like, as mentioned before, probably a definitive moment was graduating high school. So, okay, yes, I don't have SAT scores to share, but I do have a graduation diploma. A pivotal moment was after graduating, I kind of already was full steam ahead. So this is in Miami. I'm doing demo tapes. I'm trying to get into every single battle competition that I can. I'm trying to get into every talent showcase that I can. And I'm literally running around the streets of Miami, just battling, like just freestyle battling any and everywhere, at the mall, at the movie theater, at the arcade, everywhere. So I think the thing is, when I made the move to New York, I was in the same mindset, but just now it's a whole new playground for me. So I'm running around Times Square battling, just like, who raps? I'll battle anywhere. In the Village, there used to be a record store, iconic, called Fat Beats, the corner of 6th and 8th, where there used to be a Gray's Papaya. The Gray's Papaya isn't even there anymore, but there was a record store called Fat Beats. And I used to stand in front of the Fat Beats record store, both freestyle battling and basically selling mixtapes, like mix CDs.
Wow,
and just be like,
hustle,
I was that
man.
guy. I was that guy. I was the, hey, yo, you listen to hip hop? Yo, check this out, man. I was that guy. So this is kind of the year or so leading into the 106 in Park.
To get on 106 in Park, you probably have to try out or something.
Yeah, I went to and I'm super, like, I have a strong, vivid memory, and it's something that I hold dear to my heart, is the fact that I went to just traditional, conventional, open casting call, along with the other 300 hopefuls, right? The other roughly 200, 300 people that had the same vision as me, like, yo, I'm going to get on this stage and this is going to be my big break. So I think that's the thing, is like, I had always been looking for the big break. And in this case, the 106 in Park, it was the big break.
So for those of you listening who don't know what we're referring to, there was a show on BET called 106th and Park that would just have rap battles.
Yes.
And you'd have a champion. The champion would come back every week.
Yeah.
And so Jin ended up setting the record for how long someone reigned.
7 weeks. Well, there was one guy I always like to. I'm the guy that's always very adamant about giving proper credit to for me. There was one guy before me that actually he did the they call it the 7 week run, right? And after 7 weeks, there's this notion of like, all right, this guy, he's already proven himself, so we're putting him in the Hall of Fame. So there was a guy before me. His name is Poster Boy. So I always like to acknowledge him because he ran so that I could fly, right? So shout out to Poster Boy.
Well, it's so fun. So after you win 7 weeks in a row, they put you in the Hall of Fame. I mean, that's pretty dope. So you get up there, you start winning. I'm going to guess that of those 200 to 300 people, you were probably the only Asian American.
Ding, 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 ding. Yo, you clearly did the math. Yes, I will attest. Unless someone were to come out otherwise, because I clearly do not. I would have remembered if I was there at that.
I'm
if
pretty
I was
confident
there,
you would have noticed like the other Asian American.
I would have noticed another Asian dude there. If I was like, I remember on that day of auditioning, you show up and you look around and it's just a sea of rappers, from Queens, from Brooklyn, from Manhattan, the Bronx, Staten Island, just everywhere. Some even from out of town, actually, because everyone's just vying for a spot on this stage to showcase themselves. But yeah, I think I would have remembered if I saw another Asian person.
You would have
there.
remembered, man. Because,
Okay, if you're like me, if you don't get a good night's sleep the rest of the day, and sometimes the rest of the week is horrific. It's one of the most powerful ways to improve your overall health and happiness is to get a good night's sleep. And if your daily routine has changed, it can be harder to fall and stay asleep. And that's why we are sponsored by Calm. It's an app designed to ease stress and get the best sleep of your life. And when you relieve anxiety, improve your sleep, you feel better in every part of your life. They've got a whole library of programs designed to help you sleep. You just open the app, press a button, you get sleep stories or soothing voices and all these beautiful things coming out of it. I love it. It helps me sleep. You go to calm.com/yang. You'll get a limited offer of 40% off one of the Calm premium subscriptions, which is hundreds of hours of programming. So for our listeners of the show, we're offering a special limited time promotion of 40% off of a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/yang. That's 40% off unlimited access to Calm's entire library, and new content is added every week. So get started today at calm.com/yang. That's calm.com/yang.
So you win 7 weeks in a row, and then shortly thereafter, you become signed to Rough Riders. It's like a major rap label. So was that directly off of 106th and Park?
Yeah. So there's like a fairy tale-esque aspect to all of this because Rough Riders, as it stands, was one of my childhood like dream labels to be on. Right. Like I think as a 16, 17, 18-year-old, your dream is like, OK, how do I sign with Dr. Dre? How do I sign with, the Neptunes? Or how do I sign with Rockefeller, Rough Riders? Like I'm from that era. Right. Like you mentioned, I was born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s. So at the peak of my, like hip hop journey up to that point, these were the end game was to either, Rockefeller, Rough Riders, wherever the door opens. So in terms of Rough Riders, they actually reached out before I won 7 weeks. So I think maybe a little bit past the halfway mark. After I had won 3 or 4 weeks, they already reached out. We were already having conversations, and they were so committed and they believed in my journey so much that they said, hey, if we can close this deal out, even before you win the 7 weeks,
you can announce it.
Yes. They said after you win it, they kind of spoke it into existence. They're like, after you win on the 7th week, right there is when you will announce that you've signed with Rough Riders. And this is all, and I'm so grateful because this is essentially all documented and it's captured and it lives forever on film, right? So I win the battle and the host, Free and AJ, they're like, yeah, Jin, so man, congratulations. How do you feel right now? And I'm like, how do I feel? Well, I've signed with Rough Riders. and there's this iconic moment that I forgot about. And recently someone brought it back up to me on Clubhouse. They were like, Jin, I'll never forget after you won the 7th week, you announced that you signed with Rough Riders and you went in your sweater and you pulled out the Rough Rider chain and you like put it in your mouth and you bit on it. And I'm like, damn, I don't even remember that. But apparently to this eighth grader, right? He was probably in the 8th or 9th grade at the time. He was like, yo, I'll never forget that. But the beauty of this is it would be one thing if it was like an Asian kid, right? Because I encounter a lot of that, like Asian, let's say male and females, right? That are in their 30s now. So at the time, they might have been like a junior high or a high school kid. And they'll tell me the story of, man, I used to be, running home on Friday to watch it, just to see someone that remotely looked like me. So those tales, I'm always grateful and I cherish. But this particular story about the you pulled your chain out and you put it in your mouth, it was a African American guy, right? That was like, yo, I was in the 8th grade, and for some reason, Jin, that moment has sat with me for like 20 years now. Just when you pulled the chain out and you put it in your mouth, and you were like, yeah, I'm Rough Riders now, and I'm just like, that's the power of of cultural connection. You know what I mean? Here you have a Chinese kid on Black entertainment television with a young Black kid watching it, but everyone's just like, just connected. And there isn't, necessarily like a feeling of like, yo, this doesn't make sense. It made sense to me on stage. It made sense to this 8th grader as he's watching it. So I don't know, like I cherish that. I cherish that.
Yeah, it's a very universal, like a universal, like underdog story. Honestly, it's like seeing this person come up and then have them be signed by one of the major record labels. It's like made for Hollywood stuff, man. I mean, I remember, frankly, like hearing like, hey, there was this Asian guy who won 7 weeks, like was like joined this, and then he got signed by. I was like, oh, that's dope. I have some friends who are Asian American creatives, and a lot of them have to at some point make a choice as to whether they're going to try to build their careers in Asia or the US.
Yes.
And so in your case, after a number of years performing and releasing a number of albums here in the US, you got drawn to Asia. And I'm wondering about how that happened. It sounds like you had like 1 or 2 events out there. And then did you discover when you were out there, you were like, hey, like maybe I should like spend some more time here? Because I'd imagine out there, well, I'm not sure if your reputation preceded you when you got there or whether like there were like fans, whether there were hip hop fans. I think you're one of the figures that actually helped popularize hip hop in Asia. Is that right?
I underestimated the impact of that, or maybe not underestimated, but I was oblivious to it. I knew, but I didn't know until later on. So to circle back a bit, yes, a defining moment for me in terms of my overall journey leading up to right now is actually when I parted ways with Rough Riders. So I think that's a good place to start at. So literally, I signed with them in 2002, coming off the 106 in Park. We go full throttle, right? We start working on my album. My album comes out in 2004. So my first official debut as a rap artist is this Rough Riders released album called The Rest Is History. So that came out in 2004. And I got to be honest, like even just the release of that album and everything following that, it took me some time to process the highs and lows of that. Because I think, number one, there was just this excitement that I think nobody had ever seen before. And it did kind of surround the fact that, yo, this is the Chinese dude that was on BET. He's with Rough Riders now. And then there's this sense of like, this is something we've never seen before. So theoretically, this should be gigantic. right? Something as simple as just the notion of there's like billions of Chinese people. Even if 1 out of every 5 of them buy his album, this is gonna
every
be
5, man.
phenomenal.
That's like 200 million sales. Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
exactly. So that was both. I got to be honest. It both worked for me, but against me. It worked for me because it created this sense of like, yo, this is going to be amazing. Not to mention he is on Rough Riders, one of the hugest labels ever, right? So I think it worked for me in the sense of creating excitement, but it kind of worked against me because it set this expectation that, to be honest, was somewhat unrealistic, I guess, right? And everything I'm saying now is in hindsight. I'm saying it in hindsight. But what happened was when the album released, for lack of better words, it definitely didn't hit nowhere near that mark that everyone had set for it to be deemed a success. And what does that mean? The platinum plaques, the accolades, right? The Grammy Award, the MTV Award. So none of that stuff was attained. So in that sense, there was this feeling of like, did Jin really live up to his potential, right? So I think upon me parting ways with Rough Riders, even though it was a amicable split, right? Like I literally sat down with the CEOs of the label one day and there was a mutual agreement that, hey, we gave it a go, but we both feel like this might be where we part ways. So we parted ways in that fashion. But to the general public, that's not exciting enough. So to the general public, the more enticing story is, yo, did you hear that Jin got dropped from Rough Riders? So that just became the Jin got dropped from Rough Riders, Jin got dropped. So then for me, I had to spend a substantial amount of time processing that. Because of course, the rapper in me, the young man in me, I was very defensive, right? So I was very like, yo, man, the industry is rigged and, everything is smoke and mirrors. My frustration was not at Rough Riders, the label, but my frustration was with like just the system. And that was a defense mechanism, to be honest. So I'm just like, even through the music I was releasing at the time, it was very bitter, frustrated, anti-industry, anti-establishment. I'm like, yo, I'm a real MC. I'm a real MC, right? So in hindsight, I'm glad I had that. It was therapeutic. But underneath, man, I was broken. And underneath, like, meaning there was this sense of like, man, I watched my childhood dream come true. And then I kind of watched it fall apart too. So this is, I preface the Asia thing with that because I think it's connected. So as I'm navigating through this heaviness, there was like a good 2-year period where I'm like, I was this close to basically saying, this might not be it. Let me go to Home Depot. Let me go to, I don't know why I always say Home Depot because not that I specifically, maybe I have a subconscious interest in working at Home Depot.
Yeah,
home improvement,
like
But I always, when I share this story, I'm like, I was this close to going to Home Depot and seeing if I could get a job application, right? Because I'm like, yo, I mean, if this is not the path for me, I'm not going to just wallow and just be unproductive. I still got to go out there and get a job. Now, at that time, I wasn't even married yet. So I wasn't married. I didn't have a family. So the intensity of responsibility wasn't extremely heavy. But here comes the opportunity to go to Asia. Specifically at the time, I started dabbling and rapping in Cantonese, which is, the language we spoke at home growing up. So I'm grateful on that note too. But I started dabbling, rapping in Cantonese. And then in 2008, I had a chance to go and release an album in Cantonese in Hong Kong. And then one door opened to two doors opened to four into 8. And I spent like a good 4 years there, branching out into stuff beyond music. So acting, hosting, things like that. And then the shift to come back was actually when my first son was born, Chance. So we have an 8-year-old. Yeah, we have an 8-year-old. We have an 8-year-old and a 1-year-old now at this point.
Congratulations, man! I've got an 8-year-old too, and that child being born definitely does change things up.
All right, this episode of Yang Speaks is brought to you by Stamps.com. Let's face it, taking trips to the post office is probably not how you want to spend your time. And that's why we recommend shipping online at Stamps.com, which allows you to mail and ship anytime, anywhere, right from your computer. letters, packages, you name it, and you pay a lot less with discounted rates from USPS, UPS, and more. I'm a fan of this. Anytime I need to mail something, just stamps.com. Very simple. I don't need to go to the post office. Save time, save money. And you can do it 24/7, any letter, any package, any class of mail, anywhere, wherever you send. So here's the deal. It's a freaking no-brainer. So stop wasting time going to the post office and go to stamps.com instead. There's no risk. And with our promo code YANG, you get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. So just go to stamps.com, click on the microphone, top of the homepage, type in YANG. That's stamps.com, promo code YANG, stamps.com. Never go to the post office again.
So did you meet your wife while you were in Asia?
So my wife is a ABC, like myself, American-born Chinese. So there's a strong parallel in terms of our journey in that sense. Her family came here from Hong Kong. She was born and raised. She's a true native New Yorker to the heart. So she was born in New York, raised in New York. She's here. She's a New Yorker to the heart. She's probably, next to Spike Lee, she's right there in terms of Knicks, supporting the Knicks. She's that. I met her, of all places, in Puerto Rico. So I met her in Puerto Rico, and it was in the context of a hip hop related music seminar. So I was there to perform, and she was there as part of the organizers. And it's funny because I remember when I showed up, I walk up to the registration counter, where you get your badge and the itinerary and stuff like that. And I looked at her and she looked at me. And I think our mutual kind of thought was, we're probably the only Chinese people here, right? At this thing.
At this hip hop performance.
At this hip hop, yeah. But it wasn't like sparks flying, and it wasn't like that. But we ended up crossing paths again later on in New York, and then it was just like what do you call it? A traditional courtship. Hey, you want to go watch a movie? And after the movie, it's, hey, you want to go get something to eat? So I think we watched like a movie almost like twice a week for that period. And, it was dinner, movie. And honestly, when I went to Asia for that first run to do the Cantonese album, we were definitely not married yet. So there were no kids. We weren't even engaged. I think it was actually after me spending like a year or two in Hong Kong that I was like, what are you doing, Jin? You know what I mean? Like, there she is.
Oh, wow.
She's right in front of you.
Another Hollywood thing, man. You were
Another
like, I'm going to
Hollywood
go back for my girl, like, and eventually my wife.
Yes.
So how was the time in Asia? I mean, it must have been an adventure. Like I think you did something with like Wang Lihome, who I actually kind of grew up with. Like, I went to summer camp together, and then really, I know it's a small world.
That's sick.
And so for him, he went to Asia to try and make the music thing work, and it worked out. What was it like working in the industry in Asia versus in the States?
Yeah, so man, Lee Holmes amazing, by the way, super talented, and kudos to him actually, because he was one of the first people to reach out to me. And specifically, to extend the invite to work on music together. He literally was the first. So in terms of post 106 in Park, post Rough Riders, he was the first artist in that aspect from Asia, who had a huge following and already fully established, to reach out to this, little rapping Chinese kid in New York and say, hey, I'm working on my next album and I have a song that I totally can hear you on and would love to invite you on. And it wouldn't even feel complete if you didn't jump on it. So he was very inviting in that regard. So shout out to him. But the experience for me, for sure, was culture shock, because I think I had been to Hong Kong several times as a kid, several times. So in the same fashion that I had a grandma and grandpa in New York, I also had I had grandparents in Hong Kong. So as a child, I would frequent, vacation trips to Hong Kong. So it wasn't like a complete fish out of water sense, but I think the context of what brought me out there was crucial, because now I'm there as a recording artist. And now there is this notion of, so this is, every time I would do a radio interview or a press interview, I would be introduced as, straight from America, the rapping sensation, and there's this pre-built perception of who I am already, a preconception of who I am already, which is, he's born and raised in America, or as they would call us there, I love the title, ABCs, right? And what that means is, even right off the bat, I think not all, but for the most part, there is a notion of, okay, he might not be as Chinese as us. He might not be as in touch with his culture. So when I'm doing these interviews, something as trivial as, let's say it's a food interview, right? And we're sitting at a restaurant, you'll hear the little jab that's like, hey, you need a fork? You probably don't know how to use chopsticks. You need a fork? Hey, somebody get him a fork, right? Or just things like that, And I took it in stride. Like a lot of it, I don't think it was malicious. But every now and then you'll be like, "Yo, like, is that like, where is this?" And some of them were really nice about it. But I think for some cases there was definitely like, I had to process it and not take it personal.
You never feel more American than when you're in Asia
Because
they like go after you. And like
Yeah.
the same thing happened to me, here in the States. You're like, well, you're Asian American and whatnot. You go over there and they're like, hey, ABC, ABC. It's like, oh,
All in all, once I was able to get past the culture shock, even for me, it was great. It was amazing. Like I said, it was beyond what I expected in terms of productivity, in terms of fruitfulness, and more importantly, man, just me being able to come into manhood. I would even say that, like, come into a space where I'm very clear on what my purpose is, on what my passion is, what my priorities are. So it was great. And honestly, even in Hong Kong specifically, is where I grew in my faith, like in a way that completely caught me off guard. Yeah.
oh, that's beautiful, man. And you come back, you become a dad, family man,
Mhm.
raising the kids in New York. You've branched out creatively. You're working on a bunch of different things. You were in one of the Fast and Furious movies.
Yeah.
You did a comedy special that was released online.
Yeah.
And so I love the fact that you are still expanding artistically and creatively, and
Mhm.
you remain one of like the true trailblazers, certainly for a lot of people. What are you working on now, and what can people expect to see from you?
So I think it's a very special time, for myself and for our community, right? And I emphasize our community. I mean, like, as far as within the Asian American community, and I only say that because in terms of like trailblazing, right? And I'm very humbled whenever I hear you say it, because I don't know. I just feel like sometimes the beauty in being a trailblazer in that sense is when you're not necessarily setting out to do it. Does that make sense?
Oh no, I get it, man. I mean, like
Oh, I know you get it.
I ran for president,
Exactly.
and like it's like you're like, well, I'm very very aware of the fact that I'm the first
Exactly.
Asian American guy.
Bingo. But I think the driving force is you're balancing that combined with what just your core vision is, right?
Yeah,
So it's like
totally.
it is a balancing act, because even for me, obviously it's nowhere near the scale of running for president, right? But for me, I think as I reflect on my journey, it has been a complete balancing act from beginning to end, which is, how do I embrace my culture, but in a way, do I want to be defined by it? And that's the thing, you know what I mean? Like, I'm never going to shy away from the fact that I'm Asian American, but at the same time, I also don't want to be just seen only as, yo, he's an Asian rapper, and that's why we need to pay attention to him. It's a balancing act. But I've learned to find peace in, just internally. So in terms of what's going on right now, I feel like there's a unity within the community that I've never seen, right? And as far as everybody galvanizing their energies collectively to tell our stories, to have a voice. So I'm excited in that, because when I think of trailblazers, for some reason, the first person to pop into my head is Clyde Drexler. So, but I think, to me, there's a beauty in, this is a real time epiphany that I've had literally within these last few weeks. I think I've always looked at my journey as my journey, right? Like, oh, this is my journey. I started rapping, blah, blah, blah. But unbeknownst to me, my journey has been a lot of people's journey, like, meaning when I encounter these, 30-year-olds now, and they're like, no, Jin, I remember being, in the seventh grade, as I mentioned earlier. So it's dawning on me more and more now that it's our collective journey. So I think I'm still in the music zone. I think music will always be at the core of me. But in terms of like the acting, I feel like I'm only slowly tapping into the acting thing. So hopefully there's more opportunities in that regard, developing projects on my own as well. And just pushing forward my own journey and our collective journey, so.
Yeah, I mean, you've been a real leader around the anti-Asian violence that's been occurring. You in at least one case, helped galvanize energy around like a victim of hate crime here in New York, and then you helped draw a lot of attention to helping that person.
Yeah,
it's been a really difficult time. But I have to say, Jin, like your journey is not your own. You've inspired so many people. And I'm grateful that you and I have become friends over this time. I'm incredibly grateful to you. You've elevated the last couple of years for me, truly. And having you alongside me at some of these events has made me so happy. It's like filled me with joy. You're just like a very uplifting person. And I think, this conversation actually helps explain like the journey you went through, because like you had so many experiences that other people can can only faintly dream of what that would be like to be like carrying like the mantle of, in some cases, an entire like multi-million like the hopes and dreams of like like an entire people like artistically, and then going through the ups and downs of that, and then having to face down what that would be like. Most of us can't really imagine what that would be like. And one thing that I said at the last event we were at is that we need to support creators more, because there's something very, very deeply personal about you're trying to create art and then put it out there. We need more of it in the world. We need more folks like you doing the things that you do, for sure. And it's one reason I was excited to have this conversation, so people could frankly like humanize the journey that you've undergone.
Thank you for having me, man. I'm excited for what's to come for you. Super excited to be part of it. Excited to collectively just push forward, man. Definitely.
Fantastic, Jin. Let's do it, man. Let's show that there's no limit. People can do anything. Just like you told your parents, like, decades ago. It's like, don't worry, mom and dad. Like, we can do this thing.
Yes.